A one-size-fits-all approach is no longer the gold standard in coaching. We need to be using all the data that we can get our hands on to help evolve a client's training program. Blood and biomarkers are the next frontier that we should be exploring in terms of individualizing a client's experience. Ash Anwar is here from Molecular U to talk to us about how we can do just that. Welcome to the Strength Coach Collective, a podcast brought to you by Two Brain Business. We are here to help advance the strength and conditioning coaching community by bringing you a wide range of experts in the field. Join our group at strengthcoachcollective.com. For today's episode, I'm your host, Kenny Markwardt. Ash, I'm very excited to have this conversation with you. This is, with all the guests I've had on here in the past, I have a pretty decent knowledge, so we have some back and forth. And you are, I think, my first guest where I'm just totally bewildered in the atmosphere of what we're going to talk about. So this will be quite an educational experience for me, and I'm excited for our listeners as well. So Ash, welcome.
Yeah, happy to be here, and I'm sure it'll be knowledgeable for me too, because I've dealt with a lot of biomarkers and things in my career, but I'd love to hear about their application and to get that feedback as well. Is going to be a good learning experience for me too.
Cool. So you hit on something I want to start with, biomarker. As we've talked about, before this podcast, the word biomarker keeps coming up. Obviously, it's a big thing that you guys do at Molecular U. Molecular U. We've talked about how I'm going to screw this up many times over the podcast, but can you define a biomarker for me and for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So a biomarker is, it's a broad term. It's used in a lot of different contexts, but essentially what a biomarker is any sort of measurable indicator of a biological state or condition. So that could be a metric associated with how someone is in terms of their health status, in terms of their aging and longevity. It could be in the context of a disease, or in the context that maybe we're exploring is more performance and recovery from exercise and things like that. So a metric, a measurable indicator, is what's referred to as a biomarker. And biomarkers can be of many different types. So genes could be a biomarker. For example, if you're looking at genetics, in the context of what we do at Molecular U here, we are looking at proteins and metabolites. And what these are specifically are the metabolites are the byproducts of the chemical reactions that occur in the body. So we're looking at metabolites as one class of biomarkers. And proteins are essentially the structural and functional elements in your body, right? They are part of our structural set. So they're part of the skeletal system, the muscle system as well. And they perform a lot of functions, a lot of enzymatic functions when we go and exercise or when we eat, when we stress out. All these kind of things are governed by proteins as well. And that's the second class of biomarkers that we assess here at Molecular U. And we put this all together to give an indication of a person's health status, a person's disease risk, or their responses to exercise and changes in their diet.
Cool. I mean, that's all three of those things you just referenced, as far as, but maybe not three, there's a million, but post, future, present, like the things that they're going to be indicative of through, I think we should probably reference, we're talking about a blood test. Like that's how we're going to compile this information through what you guys do. There's so much to explore. Like how is this relevant to fitness, to longevity, to helping people live longer, live better?
Yeah, I mean, we could look at it in the context of blood tests for sure, right? Like, because there's multiple different, I would say, biofluids that, people can assess. Blood is a big one. And the reason that we believe blood is so important is that all of our key organs and tissues are essentially bathed in blood, right? So it's the perfect medium from which not only is the body nourished when it comes to the nutrients and things that it needs, but also as we just go through our daily lives, our stresses, our if physical activity produces a lot of byproducts and waste products that our blood carries and filters it out from our blood to keep us optimal. So blood is already right off the bat, I think, a very important biofluid and very informative biofluid. Of course, we could look at other things like urine. So for specific cases, urine might be looked at. Cerebrospinal fluid, in the case of neurological disease, for example, is a vital one for that one as well. But I think blood overall is really a good, excellent medium for getting a really broad-based, comprehensive set of information about an individual. And the reason biomarkers are important and really good in the context of what we're looking at is they're really objective and they have a lot of scientific data behind them. So tons of research has been already done on blood biomarkers in their relation to disease and performance. So we have a lot of that information already at our fingertips, and it's really about synthesizing that information down to whoever the users are going to be, whether that's coaches making sense of that information for their clients, or it's the clients themselves trying to understand more about their body on a much, much more deeper level. The reasons we're particularly interested in biomarkers in the blood from a molecular use standpoint is for two essential reasons. One, these biomarkers act as an early warning system, essentially. So it allows us to understand the early changes that could occur when it comes to disease, or when the body is under a tremendous amount of stress, or when there's some sort of a deficiency. Maybe there's a lot of overtraining, for example, a lot of inflammation that's happening there, or the immune system is primed and activated for some reason and causing some sort of autoimmune damage. Like, looking at biomarkers gives us this early detection system and allows us to understand the body on a deeper level, understand any sort of issues earlier on, so we can intervene and then put this individual back on track towards a much more optimized, healthy, and longevity angle, essentially. And then the second reason is personalization. So when we talk and think about genetics, while we are very unique on a number of fronts, each of us has a uniqueness and a personalization to our biomarkers. So just like the genetics, the metabolites and proteins that are in our blood, we also have a unique combination of these biomarkers that exist for us. These biomarkers also respond to exercise, to diet, to our daily lives in a truly unique way. And to look at these biomarkers, essentially, we are able to uncover a unique pattern, a unique signature for each individual.
Crazy. There's again so much to explore.
Yeah.
In for basic context, and you're out of Canada, which I think that's a little bit relevant to the question I'm going to ask, because most of our listeners are probably U.S. based, and when we get a blood test from our general practitioner, again, that might be different. You guys might not. I don't know I think it's probably what I'm thinking about is like insurance coverages, et cetera here. So in any case, comparatively to what we get in a generic, wellness exam to all the biomarkers that you guys are doing at Molecular U, how does that compare?
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I think in a ways it is quite similar. So the system in Canada and the US, I think, are quite similar that way,
Okay.
where a physician can recommend a blood test. So they'll fill out a form. You can go into a blood collection or phlebotomy kind of outfit. Sometimes it's done by the clinic in-house, or it can be done by, I think in the US, there's Quest, those kind of companies. We have our equivalents up here as well, like Life Labs and Dynacare, for example. So very similar. You'll go in, you'll get the blood test. The test will be analyzed in a specialized dedicated laboratory, and then the results are fed back to the physician, where they bring you back in for a consultation and make a decision. So in that process, we are quite similar. A physician in the US can order our test, but the key differences are in specific areas. So a traditional blood test done by the physician, they're usually looking at a handful of biomarkers, right? And these biomarkers are more on the diagnostic side of things. So basically, these are the biomarkers that once your body is in a state of consistent damage and disease, these are the biomarkers that would become changed. And that's what they're looking at, a handful of these biomarkers that will indicate, okay, whether or not you have a specific disease. Because usually when individuals go to a doctor, they have a symptom or they're worried about something, and the doctor is essentially using the the standard clinical tests to determine what is the disease and what is the medication that potentially they're going to put the individual on. With molecular U, we are looking at hundreds of biomarkers. So our blood, as I mentioned earlier, our blood is so rich in information, and traditional clinical labs only look at a small portion of the biomarkers that exist in the blood. We are looking at 300 currently and expanding to close to 1,000 of these biomarkers in our blood. And this is going to give us a tremendous level of information when it comes to looking at an individual's health and disease status and response to various stimuli. And as I mentioned, the doctor is looking for something diagnostic.
Hmm.
Our biomarkers that we look at are really in the realm of a pre-diagnostic stage. So
Yeah.
if you think about, let's say diabetes, for example. So diabetes is where the body loses control of the ability to regulate blood sugar, right? So when the doctor prescribes their standard clinical test, they're really looking at fasting glucose as an indicator of like, okay, you've unable to manage your sugar levels, so it's really high. Or they're looking at something like hemoglobin A1C, which gives them a 3 month time window as to like the average levels of glucose in your blood. And they're just looking to
Mm.
see that, okay, if it's elevated, okay, you're likely to be diabetic or pre-diabetic. But the biomarkers that we're looking at are much, much more in the earlier stage because our bodies do a really good job of maintaining what's something known as homeostasis, which is a normal state. So, despite all the insults that are happening to our body on a daily basis, our body always tries to maintain a state of normality. So, there's a lot of redundant systems and that compensate for any sort of dysfunction. And if you think about it like dominoes, there's a lot of dominoes that start to fall very early in the years, and
Mm.
until you have enough dominoes that fall and your system cannot maintain that state of normality, that state of homeostasis anymore, that's when the final domino falls down, which is fasting glucose, and then
Yeah.
the doctors are able to understand and indicate it. But we are looking at those earlier dominoes further upstream. And the beauty of that is once we can see those early dominoes start to fall, we can intervene right away and put you on a track where that damage is completely reversible, completely repairable, and even you can optimize your system to make sure that you're not even falling down that path of disease trends anymore.
That's incredible. It's like, yeah, I think it's the frustrations that I and a lot of people I talk to, and a lot of my clients, and a lot of people in the industry are like the medical. And I don't think it's their fault. I think it's just the it's so clogged up, but it's so late and so reactive and so much less
Yeah.
preventative that a lot of the times, I go to the physician, they're like, "What in the world are you doing here? Like, you're you're clearly healthy, you're clearly doing fine, but I want to know more. I want to be where you're what you're talking about, steps and steps and steps ahead. So it's
Yeah.
not even we don't even ever get to that point.
Yeah.
Why are you talking to me and fitness coaches and not more? And I realize you probably are talking to physicians as well, but like, why are you talking to me? Why are we talking to coaches?
I think that well, I would say first of all we are talking to clinicians
Sure.
definitely because I
Yeah.
think it
Right.
is part of that healthcare continuum too. But I think in terms of our health journeys, I think especially after COVID, people have taken a lot of their health into their own hands, and
Hmm.
they're really looking to take control of their own health. And so there is a big capacity for people to understand what's going on a much deeper level than waiting for potentially something to go wrong or waiting for things to be at a diagnostic level. As you mentioned, they want to take these steps earlier, they want to have control earlier, and I think this is where coaches and fitness professionals like yourself can fit in really well here, right? Like it's really all about understanding the early stages of the body status in terms of health, but not only understanding that, but being able to take control and guide individuals and guide clients into not only warding off disease, but also pushing them towards a higher degree of wellness, a higher degree of resilience against disease, a higher degree of optimization for their health. Because I think just being healthy, just being normal is a good thing, but we can use the knowledge of our biomarkers and knowledge that you guys have in understanding the body mechanics, understanding the physiology of exercise to take it further, to make ourselves really strong and against any sort of stresses that we have in our environment, quite that we have on a regular basis, right?
Yeah, I think that was transparently a little bit of a leading question because
Yeah.
I perhaps with a little bit of ego think that with fitness, like we can do so much change in terms of health and wellness. So like we are kind of the gatekeepers before people need to go to a physician. So I was kind of hoping you'd say something along those lines that like, we do have the chance to elicit so much of that change. I think that perspective is becoming more apparent and more accepted, where there are those of us who are very proactive and are taking steps to get more data and more things to individualize what we're doing, both at nutrition and training, sleep and recovery and supplements and et cetera, et cetera. But I think it's just kind of flipping this paradigm of health on its head with thinking that like we are kind of the initial practitioners of this to help people change that. So I guess I was just kind of hearing it from your perspective of like why, like how Molecular You is looking at fitness as one of those big leaders in how we're going to make these
Yeah.
changes according to what we're going to uncover.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And I think like fitness and exercise, I mean, we've heard it from the doctor all the time, right? Like, they speak to us about like eat better and exercise, which is, like there's two big problems with that. First of all, everyone knows that we should eat better and exercise.
Right.
And you're exactly right when you said that you guys are the gatekeepers to health. You truly are, because it's one thing to hear advice. It's another thing to have someone who guides you through this process in a really holistic and data-driven way, as you guys are doing, but also be that accountability partner and to help that individual really take control of their health and say, okay, you know what, I am going to be so much more proactive on my health to make sure that I'm going to ward off any sort of disease trends or understand this earlier. And you guys are there to essentially give them this information, guide them through this information, but also act as builders of these healthy habits as well, which I think is really important. And I'm guilty of this too. Like I'll go to a gym and I'll do a burst of heavy weights and short reps or something, right? I'll be like, okay, there we go. I'll make myself really sore. And, I've done my exercise for whatever, for the week, right?
Yeah.
And I'll feel so sore and fatigued that it becomes almost a negative feedback loop. Like I'm not going to go to the gym for a while until I feel guilty again,
Yeah.
right? Which is not the way we're supposed to approach, fitness. And you guys have that knowledge and have that understanding to be like, okay, Ash, don't push yourself, don't go to the gym, lift this, do these exercises right now. We're going to create a specific data-driven guided program for you so you can not only build towards the goals that you want mutually and have that understanding as well, but also build those habits along the way where it becomes, instead of a negative feedback loop, it becomes a positive feedback loop where I'm happy every single time I'm going to the gym. Okay, I'm making incremental progress towards climbing that mountain.
Mm.
And I think where Molecular You can supplement with you guys is giving you those metrics of those biomarkers to be like, okay, these incremental changes that you're seeing on the physical side, where somebody is able to lift more or do more reps, we're also seeing this in terms of the molecular drivers for muscle turnover, muscle building. And with the biomarkers, we can actually even see, okay, is the individual being pushed too much? Do we see too much muscle damage? Do we see inflammation that's maybe indicative of overtraining? Do we see biomarkers that are impacting their endurance and their ability to recover from this exercise? So feed that extra data for you guys to make that much more informed decision at this very critical stage for clients.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, we're so used to, we look at body composition, we look at strength numbers, we look at VO2 max, and occasionally we'll look at, cholesterol and A1C. Again, we're not in a position where we can make diagnoses, but like we can look at those things. We can look at blood pressure, resting heart rate. There are a handful of markers that we can look at that would present and be easily accessible as a coach that we can use for our metrics. Like, what are some of the top ones that we have the biggest sets of change on, or biggest opportunities for change on, as biomarkers that you guys uncover? It's a big
Oh,
question, I realize, but
yeah. Oh yeah, no, we can go through it. I think, and I mean, this is the level of information where I think you guys are already doing such an unprecedented amount of work, like to integrate, to look at the external factors like reps and VO2 max is such a great indicator of health and everything. I remember in my early days in my kinesiology class being on that bike and having to on that balloon and do the
fond
VO2.
memories, I'm sure. That's just a great 15 minutes of your life. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But it is an arduous test, definitely, but it is such a good indicator of essentially another metric that you guys capture. And blood pressure, again, very very critical. And I mean, excites me to know that you're looking at some biomarkers like cholesterol as well. In terms of what we can supply from the molecular use side, like I think there's three very big areas that I think we have in terms of our set of biomarkers that I think can feed in and help supplement the information that you're already kind of assessing, but looking at it from the molecular side. So the first one really is I would say around our capacity for recovery and resilience. So this is where I'm really talking about how, from a molecular side, how we can understand how well our body repairs, adapts, and handles the physical and mental stresses of daily life, right? So this is things, biomarkers that are central around to multiple different systems in the body. So systems like inflammation, looking at immune biomarkers as well. The mitochondria become very important at this stage. So mitochondria is, they always say, is the powerhouse of the cell, which is apt because this is the structure where we produce our energy. So we want to look at how efficiently that energy is being produced. And then, we look at things like oxidative stress, right? So we talked about waste products. As you exercise, you develop, free radicals and waste products that need to be eliminated and need to be neutralized. If not, they can cause excess damage in the body. And then there is a very key interface or bridge between our neurological system and our endocrine system. So, how does our neurological system interface with the hormonal system in our body? And we want to make sure that balance is really optimized. So, those are some of the key systems that feed into what I would call a recovery and resilience theme of the body. And, we have a number of biomarkers there, right? Inflammatory biomarkers like C reactive protein, for example. Some of your listeners might have heard of C reactive protein. It's a common inflammatory protein. Exercise can cause it to increase temporarily, which is a good thing because in response to load, you are having a little bit of muscle tearing and everything. So your body does respond by increasing the inflammation. But we optimally want to see that level of inflammation go back down to normal baseline levels after exercise.
Mm.
If we don't, it indicates that there's too much pushing on the system. There's overtraining and too much inflammation, even post exercise, hinders any kind of gains and any sort of growth that you would have. So it actually acts as an obstacle,
Mm.
essentially, right? So
Yeah.
you want to look at that really carefully. And in terms of, for example, the mitochondria. for example. There's a metabolite known as beta hydroxybutyrate. So some listeners may know that as well. It's essentially a ketone body. So it's produced when our bodies shift from aerobic to anaerobic systems, essentially, right? So instead of using sugars to burn for fuel, we shift towards fat metabolism. So we burn our fats to produce energy, which is a much more energy intensive process, but also produces ketone bodies. And beta hydroxybutyrate is an example of that ketone. So understanding the levels of BHB or beta hydroxybutyrate in the blood give us an understanding of like, okay, how well is the body able to shift from that aerobic to anaerobic type of fuel source,
Yeah.
and how is it in terms of the efficiency of that, and how is it in terms of like burning the fats, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so we want to basically like that gives us a good metric and indicator of that as well.
How do you see that? Like, that would probably be a correlative of VO2 max, I would imagine. How do you see that translated by like baseline fitness improvement versus other interventions that are possible through nutrition, or like what? Tell me about the things that we can do to change that may or may not be like a common prescription for improving VO2 max, or maybe they're the same. Does that make sense? So was a wildly meandering question, but the point was like,
Yeah.
is it the same thing as would that just be a representation of VO2 max, or would that be a supplement to an improved VO2 max by improving your hydro? Oh gosh, what can you
Oh,
say it for me? My
oh yeah.
chemistry's
No worries.
gone.
No worries. BHB
There
basically.
we go. But
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. But yeah, no, there is definitely a correlation between BHB levels and VO2 max. And I think the where the data is going to be really beneficial here is where VO2 max really is the output, right?
Yeah.
And changes in VO2 max are going to be, I would say, harder to assess. Maybe like you want to see a big step up between that, but while you're seeing the changes in two different readings of VO2 max, we might have multiple changes in levels of BHB and these other biomarkers associated not only with, fat oxidation and the fatty metabolism, but in the case of VO2 max, like we have biomarkers around lung elasticity,
Hmm.
right, which may change. Uh, we have biomarkers and metabolites around how efficiently gas exchange is occurring, because as you exchange gases, the O2 and CO2, you're also changing the pH levels of the blood, right? And so certain biomarkers will also adjust based on those changes of pH when it comes to the gas exchange in our lungs as well. So we're getting multiple different intricate detailed measurements from the biomarkers while the VO2 max is being optimized. And I believe that'll help even guide towards how do we optimize and improve an individual's VO2 max, for example. So you're going to get a lot more information that supplements what you guys are already doing.
Yeah, totally. That's as you were going through all those different little measurements and things that would be, um, that contribute to the improvement of it. Like that just made my brain go in so many different directions of how you would be able to optimize that for somebody rather than just a stereotypical VO2 max improvement protocol, which is, not all that difficult to write, but with having some more inputs that you could change to improve that for somebody specifically is just, that's wild. That's super exciting to me.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just a nerd, but that's all right. I think that's you are too, on a different side of the
Yeah, I
on a
mean,
different side of the room. So that's
there's
all right.
something for everybody. There's something for everybody as well here. And I mean, one thing I wanted to point out as well, right? Like we are like we've been talking a lot about kind of the functional element of this, right? VO2 max, a functional score. I was talking a little bit about like the structural elements, right? Structural biomarkers, and if you think about weights. lifting, if you can put more load and things like that, that might be the structural thing. One
Hmm.
area that we can dive into a little bit more too is kind of the third element that I think the molecular you can provide is insights into kind of this connection between energy and mind
Hmm.
performance as well, right? So we have, our cognition is so intricately linked to fitness and exercise, as well as how well our body uses energy, right? Both in terms of burning sugars but also burning fats as well. Our brain uses tremendous amount of oxygen, right? A tremendous amount of energy, right? And so when you're essentially optimizing your fitness and your body kinetics and movement, indirectly you are optimizing your cognitive ability, right? And so we have biomarkers and metrics that look at how efficiently your brain is at neurotransmitter metabolism, like how well is the brain structures communicating, and does this how effectively does this translate into higher cognitive ability. And every athlete will tell you, right, when they're playing sports, it's not just about the physical movement, it's also about, a lot of it is higher level thinking. And so we will have biomarkers around a lot of that, right? How the brain efficiently uses energy, how the neurotransmitters and hormones that are really relevant for optimal brain health and cognitive ability, how those change and how those are at different baselines and improve over the fitness capacity or fitness metrics that you guys will do. And of course, one of the things we want to build too with the brain, just like in our muscles, is we have biomarkers that are established for cognitive resilience, as it were, right? Being resilient against any sort of damage that could impact our brain or central nervous system. We want to make sure our bodies are resilient against that, resilient against inflammation, particularly neuroinflammation, which has a even bigger effect on the brain as well. So how can we make sure that our brain and central nervous system is even more protective and has that shield against those insults that can be very damaging?
Yeah. How, man, how do you improve those things? Like, so again, like this is an interesting set of data to be able to compile. But what do you? And I can realize there's again there's 200. How many biomarkers do you guys measure in a test? 200.
288 right now. Yeah.
Okay. So how do we change those things? Like and that for that example, let's talk about the cognitive resilience. Is that the way? Is that the term you
Yeah.
used? Okay.
Yeah. Cognitive resilience. Yeah.
Okay. What can somebody do about that? Say they get a low score on that. What does that mean for them?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it's if they get a low score, it's not the end of the world, right? It just means that we can work towards improving on those specific biomarkers that can essentially provide a shield for the brain
Mm,
and central nervous system structures, essentially, right? So, for example, this is where I think the data that we have that's based out of a tremendous amount of scientific literature. So what we do at Molecular U is we take all that scientific literature that's out there on these biomarkers and essentially catalog it, compress it, make sense out of it, and create these models that allow us to understand these various things like cognitive resilience, and then essentially translate it for the users of our platform. And as new research comes out, we're always on top of this, right? So we always scan the research, the latest research, and then bring it into our systems. We have many, many scientists like myself comb through this information, update models, and always provide that latest understanding and interpretation around these different themes as well. But this is where I think the interface between what we do and what you guys are doing is so critical, because we're going to give you that information when it comes to the biomarkers associated with, let's say, cognitive resilience.
mm,
But we have an academic understanding from the exercise physiology scientific literature that, let's say, weight training is beneficial for cognitive improvement when it comes to Alzheimer's disease. Like
mhm.
there's papers published on that, right? But how is this, how does this occur? and what type of weight training, what regiment of weight training, and of course the uniqueness of individuals, right? Is weight training effective in improving the cognitive resilience biomarkers in this individual? If not, why? What else do we have to do to push these biomarkers to get to that stage, right? What we know from the biomarkers, for example, a biomarker for cognitive resilience is something known as there's a biomarker called insulin-like growth factor binding protein, for example. So there's binding protein 2, binding protein 3. Essentially, these are a family of proteins that bind and regulate insulin growth factors, which are hormones in our blood. And the regulation of these proteins governs how plastic our brain is, so how able to adapt and grow and change with knowledge and everything our brains are, how effective it is in repairing itself, and essentially a very big neuroprotective layer.
Hmm.
So this family of proteins essentially provides those roles. What's known right now is that regular exercise, so here the consistency comes in play as well. So regular exercise, regular training of the body and the mind upregulates these insulin-like growth factor binding proteins, right? This family of proteins gets more expressed when we have regular, consistent exercise.
Yeah.
But how does this occur and what type of exercise? That's what we really need to look at. But we know kind of the biological mechanisms behind it, that they get upregulated, they increase the signaling when it comes to insulin growth factor signaling pathways, which are important for neuronal health, synaptic plasticity, and cognitive function. So it makes you smarter, but when we're looking at an individual, I would really love to see when you have, let's say, three different individuals who you've put into like three different potential exercises, where those biomarkers for a certain client is signaling really high, because that'll give us the feedback on that information that, hey, actually this type of weight training is actually giving us the biofeedback for really raising the levels of insulin growth factor binding proteins, for example.
Yeah. So fascinating and so exciting. And again, I think that the ability to individualize what somebody's doing is still like the most exciting frontier of fitness and nutrition for me. And what you just described is exactly that. I mean, from not only understanding the baseline of what they, their genetic tolerances are for how much volume they can handle. Because some people, like as a coach, I've seen people who can handle ridiculous amounts of work. Like they can do it day in, day out. And there are other people who just do not tolerate it well at all. And that's a very broad,
Right.
very broad example. But the same thing goes down the line of, neuromuscular efficiency and how many reps people can do of their run rate max, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it allows us to make these super intricate program designs
Yeah.
at one end of the spectrum. But at this other end of the spectrum, like you said, we still need people to show up to the damn gym. Like
Yeah.
that's also a really important part of this. But by showing them the results that we're able to look at through their biomarkers, show them the improvements, show how, like, give them the great evidence besides the body compositions, besides the strength numbers, but we're actually able to show on paper, hey, you're getting healthier according to these things. That should help them get some,
Yeah.
some little breadcrumbs along the way to keep them coming in. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
yeah,
you could
super,
look at
super cool.
yeah, I mean, you could look at it the other way too, right? As our, regular exercises we mentioned, so critical, so important to be consistent. When we don't exercise, our muscles atrophy, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's our neuromuscular junctions, for example, like we start to lose them. Synaptic plasticity, if you don't exercise your brain, and at the same time, if you're not working out your body, you start pruning that back as well. Even sleep, if someone's not sleeping adequately with proper sleep, there will be pruning of the synaptic connections too, which impacts cognition. So you could look at it the other way too. Like if an individual has done a test and they have a certain threshold of biomarkers, and you get an understanding of where their body's at, and if they have a period of sedentary, state where they're not working out, or they had a big gap in their exercise, you can actually look at those sets of biomarkers and actually see the decline in like the muscle turnover, and say, hey, yes, we know muscle atrophies, but look, you've seen a 15% decline because you haven't been consistent. Or looking at the biomarkers of the brain, being like, okay, look, your neurotransmitter ratios here, which we were working to optimize, well, we didn't really work on it, like because of this time you went to Cancun or something,
Yeah,
drank too
yeah,
much. Now you have a 20%, dysfunction change. We need to bring that back, right? So, it's gonna keep people in check, and I think
totally.
we need that.
I agree. I agree so much, and the that's so again so exciting. I giggle a little bit because people will leave. They'll do like a long trip, but they'll be off for the holidays, or people have their periods of time, which is totally normal. But
Yeah.
they'll get on a body composition scanner, or they'll do some sort of fitness test, and they'll have gotten worse.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, no kidding. But I tease them. I said, well, that would be pretty stupid if you kept coming to my gym and you were like, or sorry, if you stopped coming to my gym and you were getting better, like, why
Yeah.
would you keep coming to my gym? Why would you do all these things? I think it's just the more compositions or compilations of positive evidence that we can show them, and in terms of like, hey, look, just make your effort, come in, do the thing, and you'll keep improving. And also, if you don't, there's negative associations with that as well. So
Yeah.
I just love the ability to demonstrate, improve, make huge changes, etc. What does this look like from a user interface, from a coach interface? Like, what's the process like? Is it invasive? Are you taking half my blood out of my body?
No, no, no,
Okay,
definitely.
good.
Yeah. And I think that's a big positive from what we do. I think what we do is we take two vials of blood. So it's very similar to, I would say, a standard clinical draw if you go in to take a sample. There's a lot of there's a few other companies. Function Health is another example where they are looking at a number of biomarkers, but they'll take 17 tubes of blood over the course of 2 days,
Hmm,
which is pretty.
that's a
I mean,
lot.
I think it's pretty invasive. But ours is, a fasted blood draw, two vials on the same day. Doesn't take very long, and we leverage a really high throughput technology known as mass spec that allows us to take essentially very small volumes of blood and be able to essentially run it through this mass spectrometer. It's a liquid chromatography mass spectrometer that allows us to get like really accurate measurements of each of these biomarkers. And the variability between the measurements is actually very, very small. So what that enables us to do, so there is definitely that high throughput nature, which means that we can run many of these biomarkers at the same time through the system to get numbers of, the hundreds of biomarkers that we assess. But at the same time, because of the technology is so the variability is so low in terms of the fluctuations of these measurements, we can actually get really close absolute quantification of these biomarkers, which allows us to, over time, when we take multiple measurements of your blood, we will be much more certain of any changes that have occurred in that biomarker. So if a biomarker has gone up, is an actual reflection of what has happened physiologically in your blood. And this is a big advantage against the traditional clinical tests, where they're not using something like mass spec. What they're doing is they're using some sort of like an indirect measurement, like something like, let's say, ELISA, where you have a antibody tagged to basically a signal that you're able to get kind of an indirect measurement based on, fluorescence or something like that. We are actually being able to measure the actual biomarker itself through that machine.
Okay, crazy. Um, okay, so test happens. Then what's turnaround time? Like how does that look from for me? Like what would that look like if I had a client perform a test? What do we get that I can look at with them? Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll stop there for a sec. I have a follow up,
Yeah.
but I'm gonna wait.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. So what it looks like is, yeah, patient will go in, they'll do the blood test, we'll get it, we'll send it off for processing. The whole turnaround right now is weeks. And so we're talking, I think right now it's around 4 weeks, if I'm not mistaken, but we're driving that down, as the technology scales,
Hmm.
and we're working with a partner, analysis partner in the US. We're anticipating it to get the turnaround time right down to within one week,
Oh, wow.
basically. Right? So
Okay.
very quick turnaround on there. And then what it looks like right now is we do have our own platform. And so it is a web-based system which shows you all the biomarkers and shows you that information when it comes to different disease risks and different biological pathways, which are like groupings of these biomarkers together. So I talked about like inflammation, so inflammatory markers would be together, for example. So we have our own web-based platform that enables you to explore all this information, explore the interpretation, and also in the platform there's also an action plan. So it actually gives you a a set of lifestyle actions. So that's diet, exercise, and supplements that are specifically targeted to the biomarkers that are out of range in your platform. So there's that web-based platform that we deliver. Alongside, if you wanted, there is a PDF report that you can download. So a lot of our clients are like, hey, I want to see a hard copy, like a PDF copy of my results because I want to hand it to my doctor or I want to keep it for my records or whatever it is. So there is a PDF version of that. So in terms of that information, we can supply the platform. One of the things we're working towards really is this performance and fitness vertical, where
Hmm.
I think we would love to collaborate with coaches to build a custom platform to give them this information. I mean, right now we can take this information and perhaps provide a PDF information about like, okay, these fitness metrics, what do they mean? What does it mean for your client in terms of performance and things like that? So that could be stage one.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the goal really is to surface this information and design a platform that can integrate with what you guys are already using, perhaps, and give you that side of that information in a package that you're familiar with.
Yeah, cool. Because that's, I think, where I'm intimidated by that, where I'd be feeling like a client and I would just be trying to decipher a new language with new characters. Not neither of us were like, I don't know what this means. What do you think this means? And
Right,
then
right.
so, but if there's action plans, that makes it more helpful. Which was what my follow up question was before. Is like, how do I, or how would a coach make sure that they're staying in their lane within their scope of practice and not, trying to diagnose or treat something that they're not qualified to do so. Like, where does that line get blurred, or what does somebody need to do about that?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. So I think like a lot of it, as I mentioned, is proactive, right? So it's not really about, I don't think you guys would be in a position where the information would be presented in a way that you're diagnosing a condition or, anything, to act as a doctor, for example, and to do treatment or medications. That's not the ethos of Molecular You either. When it comes to looking at this information, if we do see something that is specifically, if we do see something that is, I would say, risky, or we think it's a high urgent flag, like I think we have systems to handle
Hmm.
that. And we have, doctors and clinics on staff that, we can look into that and say, okay, this is a really critical signal that we need to look into and discuss with the patient, or with the individual directly, or through the clinic. We can through your gym, we can also address any sort of things. But I would say these are very rare circumstances. I've only had a handful of these situations occur where something has signaled to be really really high priority, and we've involved our medical staff to look into this. So I think the information is going to be interpreted in a way that gives you a level of understanding where you don't have to worry about prescribing a medication or anything like that. And the action plans are designed to be very they're pulled from academic literature,
Hmm.
right? So they are best practices when it comes to, Canadian regulations or American regulations when it comes to, especially with the nutrition, for example. In Canada, we use I think it's called the Canadian Food Guide, and a lot of that basis of our action plan is from there as well. But I think when it comes to the specifics of the action plan, this is where you guys and the coaches are the experts, right?
Yeah.
This is where, based on the understanding of the information we're bubbling up, you guys are going to be able to really look at that information, pair it with your tremendous knowledge in the field around exercise physiology and everything, and be able to design that optimal plan, which we don't do, right? We just give you kind of like, okay, weight training is beneficial, right? But where do you take it from the next step, right?
Well, yeah, for sure. More pointing out of the obvious stuff, but right. What I'm hearing too, like that's good. As you were talking about some of those the predictive stuff, to think about. Okay, well, now I have to tell this guy he's got cancer. Like, you know what I mean? Like that would be. It sounds like there's steps and processes in place that would again keep us in our lane, keep everybody in a comfortable space for which we wouldn't be doing that. We'd be prescribing things that we'd be able to take
Yeah.
action upon based on a generic sense
Yes.
of where they're at.
Yes, exactly. Be very proactive, and really the focus is on wellness, longevity, and performance, and that would be there. We have multiple, I would say, AI systems that analyze the data for us
Mm.
and indicate any sort of flags for our scientists. So we have an approach, it's like scientists in the loop, we call it, right? Or human in the loop, essentially, where AI systems, will scan the information, they'll make sense of it, they'll interpret it based on the training sets that we've developed already, and this is where the interpretation is provided. But at the same time, these systems are designed to flag any sort of critical emerging flags that we need to be aware of from a medical standpoint. So right away, when it comes to the path of how that report goes or how that client's data goes through, if it is flagged with a critical piece of information, we have systems in place to handle that.
Got it. Okay. How often should somebody be doing? How often do you guys recommend somebody take a test?
Yeah, I mean, this is I think I mean, it's a good question. It's really up to, I think, the coach and the client to what they're comfortable with. In the case of like performance, I think being able to do the tests at a higher frequency is going to be much more beneficial to show those incremental changes, to make quicker and more deliberate changes in any sort of exercise plan, and really help give that biofeedback quickly to both the coach and the client. So that would mean, I would say a good frequency would be every month to every 3 months. So again, this could be something that can be decided with the coach and the client to what they're comfortable. Every 3 months is something we have done before with our we've done studies on different like responses to exercise. So every 3 months is the frequency we have used. But I understand that some clients, and if they've approached us too, they're more into the biohacking and understanding
Yeah.
more about how their systems work, and so they're much more inclined to be looking at things much more frequently and making very quick rapid adjustments. So that's definitely like the time frame I would say works fairly well for coaches, one to
Yeah.
3 months. From a clinical standpoint, when we're looking at in terms of disease management or just longevity, that's when we have a complete different channel with the clinics where those clients will do it every 6 months or every year. But it is really not about optimizing or performance. That is really about disease management, understanding any sort of potential trends towards disease that they want to handle. So for that channel, it's definitely they adopt more of the 6 months, every 6 months, or every year kind of assessment.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's just the slower moving ship with that time. But with the people that I'm thinking about, the tip of the spear, kind of like top 1%, people who are really into the optimization and maximizing every little bit that they possibly can. I can see that being more of a monthly, every 3 months type of a thing. And
Yeah.
again, there's so many biomarkers that are measured to think about what types of changes can be seen in those types of time frames. Can you see a lot of changes in a lot of things in that time frame, or does that depend?
Yeah.
Broad,
Yeah.
broad
Yeah.
question
I
again, but
think like, yeah, no, no, absolutely. I think no, you'll see quite rapid changes, especially even more pronounced in individuals that are actively pushing their bodies, right? So when it comes to looking at the metabolites, for example, those respond. So these are the chemical reactions in the body. Those respond very quickly to stimuli, right? So when it comes to like if someone's not sleeping well, or they have, inflammation, injury, whatever it is, overtraining, those will change rapidly. So it's almost like the first wave of changes that'll occur. And those changes occur within weeks, right? Like if you think
mm-hmm.
about even, let's say, going through, a marathon you're running, right? So you're training for a marathon, you do the marathon, if you analyze someone's blood, right after the marathon, already there's going to be tremendous changes within that those first few weeks. It's already going to be very different from when they started the marathon versus after finishing the marathon, right? So metabolites move quite rapidly. The second wave is actually the proteins. So those are the ones that will change over the span of 1 month. So
Mm.
from day 1 to day 30, proteins will over time incrementally change to get to a new baseline. So in an individual that is pushing themselves when it comes to performance and optimization of their body, within a month we will see quite pronounced changes, especially of metabolites, but definitely of proteins that are served to back up that kind of stuff, because they're again structural. If you're seeing structural changes, which you will see after a month, we'll get that reflected in the proteomics, in the proteins. And then
Mm-hmm.
also functionally, as people are improving when it comes to their reps or VO2 max, we will also see an a stepwise change in their protein baseline levels as well.
Cool. Super cool. Man,
Yeah.
I could dive into this stuff for hours and hours and hours and still feel like it just barely scratched the surface. Um, but I'm going to let you go after an hour we've been doing this. And where
It's
can people learn more about this from you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that I can't believe it's been an hour. It just like flew by. It's been so exciting and such a pleasure speaking to you about this as well. I think people can get more information on our website, which is at www.molecularu.com. And so that's, all of our information is there when it comes to the tests, the science behind the testing, as well as, if individuals are interested in ordering it themselves and checking it out. I think we have a vertical for there as well. We do have that direct to consumer channel. But of course, that's where, an individual is just interested in getting their own results and getting that interpretation there. But one of the key things that I would love to stress is as well here is that the power of this as well is working, especially in that vertical around performance and optimization, is in working together with coaches like you that can design that, take that tremendous comprehensive information, but then design a unique personalized health, wellness, and optimization plan for the individual.
Yeah. Yeah. The feedback loop and the changes that we could make. It's just, again, I've said this a bunch before on the
Yeah.
podcast, but like it's super exciting because I feel like there's just exponential amounts of gains once we start
Yeah,
doing this more and more and more and have more feedback loops that happen. So,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, super cool. Ash, thanks for doing this, man. This is exciting. So, appreciate your
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, likewise, I appreciate your time as well. And yeah, happy to do it. I love this stuff. Breathe, sleep, and think of biomarkers. That's all I do.
We are maybe the least popular people at parties, but you know what? Whatever. We're having a good time
Yeah,
with the
exactly.
select people that want to talk to us about these types of things. We have our specific niche. It's great,
Yeah,
and we're changing the world. We're changing the world whether they know it or not. So, yeah, it's
exactly.
cool. I appreciate it again. All right,
Awesome.
Ash.
All
Thanks,
right.
buddy.
Thanks, man.
All right. As always, thanks for listening. And don't forget, you can join our group at strengthcoachcollective.com. markwardt.com.